Mavericks. So this is going to be a prime opportunity for those Phoenix Suns to actually make a move. But you are facing young against injured veterans, kind of with LA and inconsistent AD. I'm not sure, but they definitely have the goods.
Hello and welcome to the Monday, May 24th edition of the TV on Basketball podcast with your host, TV. Hope you're all having a fantastic day and thank you for clicking on to watch or listen to today's episode. The NBA playoffs are in full swing and you know we had to bring it with the NBA content, NBA playoffs content. And today I have a new guest on the show. I'd like to welcome Adam Lewis of the WhatOffseason Sports podcast, also of the PettySportz podcast. Adam, how's it going, my guy?
I'm doing fantastic, man. Ready to chop these NBA hoops. The playoffs seem crazy this year. Got a lot of tough matchups in the game one. So I really think we're in for maybe some of the best playoffs we've seen in a while. So I'm ready to get into all of it.
Yeah, as of recording, this is the second day of the NBA playoffs. And honestly, yesterday's matchups were honestly insane. So hopefully that is good omens for what's to come for the rest of the playoffs. But today's going to be an awesome episode. We're going to be talking about the biggest question mark for each of these NBA playoff series. We're going to be giving our X factors for each of these series. And it's just going to be a really fun episode. As for Adam, I'm going to have all of his links down in the description of this video and also in my link tree. So you can go check out his podcast or the PettySportz podcast, which you should definitely go check out as well. They actually have some good like sports content there, whether it's the NBA, whether it's the NFL, they got all of it over there. And as for myself, remember to follow TV on Basketball on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram for updates on the podcast and for other content. If you're on YouTube, remember to like, share, and subscribe. That would be highly appreciated. And show love on all the podcast networks if you so choose. But yeah, let's get right into the show. Before we actually get into this NBA topic, into the NBA topics, I'm gonna throw it over to Adam. Where can they find you, and like what can they expect when they go to your channel?
Yeah, man, absolutely. Appreciate you letting me get this opportunity here. So if you catch me at What Off Season Sports Pod, all major platforms, What Off Season on all the podcast platforms, you'll be able to catch how I'm talking about football, basketball, baseball. Been talking a little bit of UFC, boxing as well, maybe some soccer if it's popping. And then I'm also with PettySportz as well, at Petty_sports with a Z on all major platforms. We do a live show every Wednesday, 8 p.m. Eastern time on YouTube and Facebook. You can call into the show as well. You can even virtually come into the show with Zoom if you like. We're always talking crazy sports over there as well with my host at Famous Fees with a Z. Super awesome guy. And we're always dropping knowledge, talking a lot of numbers, and really just having some heated debates. So if you head over to either channel, you're going to get great content from the sports world.
Yeah, these guys are hilarious. You'll definitely see some entertaining content over there. I mean, like he said, he's got all the sports covered. Literally, one of the funniest things I saw from your guys' podcast was during the NFL draft and freaking the New England Patriots drafted Mac Jones. Man, I mean, your host, I'm assuming, was a Patriots fan, and he did not take that very well.
Yeah, he wanted Trey Lance or Justin Fields really bad, and then when he saw that Justin Fields went at number 11, and then of course the huge shocker of the first round, credit to the 49ers for taking Trey Lance third overall. He was pretty upset, but I mean, you kind of saw the relationship, between Belichick and Sarkisian. They have a good relationship there, and when you go from Alabama to New England, there's really a lot of the same culture, so makes sense. But he wanted a really explosive player, yeah, so that's why you saw that reaction.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of Justin Fields, man. The Bears being able to trade up and get him, that was a very big move, and I'm excited to see him there. Absolutely. The Mac Jones pick. I mean, I got some Patriots fans like texting me throughout the draft, and they were not happy. It was very much a similar reaction as your co-host there. So, I mean, it is what it is. I mean, I'm excited to see how he does, but you could definitely see all that type of good stuff on their channel. But we're going to be talking about some NBA playoffs. I mean, it is the second day of the NBA playoffs, but we're still going to be doing some like preview stuff just because we're very much early into it. And what we're going to do in this episode, we're basically going to go through each series. We're going to talk about the biggest question we have for each series. And we're also going to be given our X factors. Kind of the same thing how we did with Miles Johnson like on the episode beforehand. You guys should really enjoy this. So yeah, Adam, pick and choose. You want to head to the West first, or you want to head to the East?
We'll start with the West, man. There's always a lot of spice over there.
Yeah, well, let's head over to the West, and I'm going to be starting off with the 1-8 matchup here with the Utah Jazz versus the Memphis Grizzlies. I got this question here. My biggest question for the series is, how is Donovan Mitchell going to be coming off that injury? Because he hasn't been playing since April 16th, and he is scheduled to return tonight as of recording. You guys are going to see the game the day after. But in terms of the series, I mean, the Grizzlies, it's a more favorable matchup for sure for the Jazz instead of the Warriors, where they have to deal with one of the best players in the world in Steph Curry. So maybe it's an easier transition for Donovan Mitchell, but we knew what he could do in the playoffs last year. He was absolutely fantastic, but maybe this ankle injury, might hold him for this playoff run. Who knows? We'll wait and see, but he hasn't been playing for a month, so he's definitely going to have some rust. Yeah, in terms of Donovan Mitchell and this injury, Adam, how do you think he's going to respond, and how do you think it's going to affect the series?
He's definitely going to need to bounce back from it, because you look at Donovan Mitchell obviously being a big player for the Jazz, a big reason why they were able, to establish that best record in the NBA. And when you look at how they've played through the entire season, it's kind of crazy to think that they're not going to be favored potentially in like top 3 or top 5 of title runs, because this is a team that, yes, has the best record in the NBA in the regular season, but you also wonder how it's going to translate into the playoffs. And Donovan Mitchell is going to be a big player in this. We know he's got to be, we know he's a big part of this team overall. And when you think about this Jazz team, Donovan Mitchell is a guy that really comes to mind for you. So when he's going to jump out of this injury, at least like you hope he does, coming back in game 1, you don't necessarily you don't want to get your hopes up too high to where he's going to absolutely come out blazing, because he is coming off of an injury, but he does need to play well enough to where this team's going to say, okay, we do feel comfortable going deeper into these playoffs if we are going to make this finals run and prove these people wrong, because we obviously have had the best record in the NBA all year. So he is going to be vital coming back off of this injury, no question.
Yeah, and I mean, like, the thing about Donovan Mitchell is that we've seen what he's did last year in the playoffs. That battle between him and Jamal Murray was one of the highlights of the entire playoffs, and you know that he can perform come playoff time. Even this season, he was having career numbers in points, rebounds, and assists. So you know that he was having a good season, and sadly, it was halted by his injury. But the good thing is he's going up against a Grizzlies team where it may be easier to defend offensively, but man, these guys are going to get into you defensively, as seen in that play-in game versus the Warriors. He's going to have to deal with Dylan Brooks probably most of the game, and it's definitely going to be a tough challenge for Donovan Mitchell, like as a first series coming back. But I mean, Donovan Mitchell is one of these star players of the series. Like I said beforehand, we're going to be giving our X factors for each of these series. I'm going to throw it to Adam. Who is your X factor in terms of this series?
Absolutely, man. So when I look at the Jazz and the Grizzlies, the Jazz are probably going to roll here. There's no question. We were just talking about how great they are and how Donovan Mitchell needs to be. And overall, when you look at, the Grizzlies side of the ball, if they want to have any real chance in this series, I know Ja Morant is probably going to play at a B to a B plus level. He still is a young guy, so we're not sure what he's going to do in these playoffs. I think this is the first season in 5 or 6 years that the Grizzlies have made it here, and Ja Morant is the captain of his team, a very young guy. When you look at Valanciunas being there to take the pressure off of Ja, yeah, he's not going to be a huge force in this series or in this playoffs if they even make a run, but he is going to be a vital piece, because you have a young player in Ja Morant, and we see this all the time in the NFL. They bring in a young player, and they know he's great right off the bat, so they just want to throw all the weight on his shoulders. You don't want him to be another guy in the NBA that's going to have to carry this entire load, especially against a team like the Jazz. So you're going to need Valanciunas out there and a couple of other players as well to be able to step up and take the pressure. Even off of those two guys, they're really going to have to play as well-oiled as a team if they want to have a chance against the Jazz. Like we both said, the Jazz are probably going to win maybe a sweep, if not, or excuse me, not a sweep, but in 5, maybe 6. So we'll see what happens in this series.
Yeah, and I like the Valanciunas pick because he has been key to them all season long. Career numbers across the board, 17 and 13 on the season. And although they got the win over the Warriors, I mean, he got into some mad foul trouble in the early stages of the game, and that kind of like provided a barrier for the Memphis Grizzlies to kind of go over. So if they're going to want any success against the Jazz here, he's going to have to stay out of foul trouble, and he's going to have to be on the floor to be an effective player for them. Because, yeah, as you said, Ja Morant, this is only his second season. He's in the playoffs. He can't be carrying this heavy load, and Jonas Valanciunas is going to have to help out a lot. As for myself, the biggest X factor in this series is going to have to be Jordan Clarkson for me, because Donovan Mitchell, like I mentioned earlier, is coming off an injury. And there's not many other guys on this team that can create their own shot. Yes, they're one of the best passing teams in the league when it comes to passing to one another. But when it comes to creating their own shot, it's literally just Donovan Mitchell and Jordan Clarkson. And Jordan Clarkson is going to have to kind of carry the load, especially with Dylan Brooks having to guard Donovan Mitchell the most of this game. So Jordan Clarkson is going to be a massive factor in this one. How do you feel like about like in terms of like the Jazz? Like, how do you think Jordan Clarkson is going to do this series?
He definitely has to be a vital piece because, this was a guy that was getting a lot of recognition for the Sixth Man of the Year award, if I'm not mistaken, and he has improved as well in his career. And when you look at how he is able to come off of the bench for the Jazz and overall be an effective player, you do hope that he is going to step up next to Donovan Mitchell because, like I said, with a guy coming back off of injury, it's kind of like I was just relating here with these rookies or these young players. You want them to be able to take the pressure off them. You don't want to have Donovan Mitchell to feel like, yes, you're back. Now we've got all of our eggs in your basket, because that would be silly for the Jazz to do at the end of the day,
Yeah, exactly. And they actually have other guys on their roster too that have been producing. So hopefully it's a nice, easy transition for him. And I think Jordan Clarkson, in terms of being able to create his own shot, I think he will be absolutely key here. I'm going to throw it over to Adam for his question on the second series we're going to be discussing, which is the 2-7 matchup, the Phoenix Suns taking on the Los Angeles Lakers. Adam, what is your biggest question for this series?
Man, this biggest question for this series for me is it centers around one of my favorite players of all time in the NBA, an obvious leader. He's bounced around through a couple teams and still has yet to make it to an NBA Finals and put a ring on his finger. Is this Chris Paul's chance finally? We saw a guy with the New Orleans Hornets, back in the day, who was really, really valuable to that team. Then when he was able to go to the Clippers and have a couple of great seasons, actually, some career years with the Clippers with Jamal Crawford, Caron Butler, Blake Griffin, DeAndre Jordan, who were all obviously dispersed throughout the NBA. And what's crazy enough is all those guys just about are on a position in a team to finally win it big. But when you look at the entirety of that Clippers team that year, it really was a lot about Chris Paul because he was able to distribute the ball. He was a veteran already. And this is one of the top point guards of all time if we're talking about productivity and how they can truly run and see an offense and knowledge of the game. You also saw him go over to the Rockets, which was kind of rocky. And then he comes over here to the Suns. Absolutely great with the Suns, propels this team. When they're young, you got a Devin Booker, you got a DeAndre Ayton, elevating this team potentially. I mean, he's getting MVP talks. Is this Chris Paul's chance finally to take a team and really put a mark on his legacy? Because a lot of people have knocked him. What does he do in the playoffs? What has he ever done for his team, necessarily down the stretch? This is his chance to prove it right here.
Yeah, exactly. And he has made a massive, massive impact on this Phoenix Suns team who haven't made the playoffs in about 11 years. So adding Chris Paul to the team, propelling them to the second seed has been a massive plus for them. A lot of that also has to do with the growth of the young guys. Also with Devin Booker, DeAndre Ayton, they all have taken a jump in their game. Chris Paul has been a great play for them this season. But in terms of the series versus the Lakers, do you think that the youth of this team is going to be kind of their downfall against such an experienced team like the Lakers?
It definitely could be, because outside of Chris Paul, I mean, yeah, you did have Devin Booker, who erupted in the bubble last year, and you felt like he was trying to take on that leadership, that captain type of role. And then the Suns were very aggressive in the offseason and went to get a Chris Paul to get some help for him. You got a guy in DeAndre Ayton as well, but these are still young guys at the end of the day. And I don't know if really one true veteran player for Phoenix is going to be able enough to elevate them. But this is the time. The Lakers feel like they're on the ropes. You don't necessarily know about the Warriors next year. Klay Thompson hasn't played in a couple of years. And at the end of the day, you don't know what's going to happen with the Clippers as well. I mean, you feel like they're ducking the Lakers just to potentially get bounced in the first round to the Mavericks. So this is going to be a prime opportunity for those Phoenix Suns to actually make a move. But you are facing young against injured veterans, kind of, with LA and inconsistent AD. I'm not sure, but they definitely have the goods to be able to make it happen,
Yeah, 100%. They have the pieces there, but the experience is something that could be absolutely massive. Going on to the X factors of this series, since you started with the last one, I'm going to start with my X factor for the series. I'm going to be looking at DeAndre Ayton for this one because DeAndre Ayton, number one overall pick a couple years back in the Luka Doncic draft, he had high expectations coming out of Arizona. Being a part of this Phoenix Suns team, he hasn't taken that jump offensively that I thought he was going to take this year alongside Chris Paul, but he has definitely improved as a defender. But in terms of this series, his first matchup is against one of the best bigs in basketball, and Anthony Davis. So it's going to be interesting to see how he's going to be able to defend him. I know he's used to defending guys in the paint, but Anthony Davis, what's special about him is that he could bring these bigs outside and he can hit the jump shots consistently. He could do it on all three levels of the basketball court. And DeAndre Ayton, he's going to have to kind of track AD throughout the entire play. And he's going to be one of those key players for them, especially on the defensive end, for the Suns to make any sort of noise in this playoffs. How do you feel about DeAndre Ayton in this matchup against AD?
Hey, you absolutely took the X factor from me, man. DeAndre Ayton is going to have to be a guy that's going to be able to provide a force because we were just talking about the young guys. He has a lot of potential for a young player in the NBA, and you can't put all the pressure on a Chris Paul and on a Devin Booker because let's be real, Chris Paul really has yet, according to a lot of critics, to get that monkey off of his back, and Devin Booker is still a young dude at the end of the day who can absolutely spray away. You feel like you want to see a little more from him on the defensive end, especially when you're going to be running into these playoffs, and when you're talking about potentially a third guy to get out there for you and provide a spark, it's like, where else do you look but DeAndre Ayton, especially a high pick, a guy who's still young, who has a lot left in the tank, obviously at just 22 years old. So I'm right there with you, TV. DeAndre Ayton really has to be that dude in this series.
Yeah, but he's going to have a tough player on his hands with Anthony Davis, and that's going to be something to really look out for. Anthony Davis could do it on all three levels, like I said earlier. And DeAndre Ayton, kind of slow-footed. Maybe he has not had much experience defending on the perimeter, but he is definitely someone that the Suns should really try to get the most out of. I'm going to head on to the next series in the West. We go from the 2-7 matchup to the 3-6 matchup. We have the Denver Nuggets taking on the Portland Trailblazers. I got the question here again. And the question I have for the series is can Michael Porter Jr. turn himself in this series to a max contract type guy? Because with the Jamal Murray going out with injury, you have Michael Porter Jr. has assumed the second option on this team. Last year in the playoffs, he was asking for more shots in these crucial moments, and now he has been putting in this scenario. He played one game yesterday. He had a decent game, but one of my criticisms of him of that game is that he just doesn't know how to make the extra pass. Whenever he has the ball, he thinks shoot first, and that can't be happening in a team where you have Nikola Jokic being willing to pass the ball to others. He needs to be able to do the same thing. We know he can score. We know he could take players off the dribble, but can he improve on the defensive end, and can he make his other teammates better? Adam, Michael Porter Jr. in this playoffs, how do you think that he is going to perform, and do you think that he's going to become a max contract guy afterwards?
I'm not so sure about the max contract guy just yet, because if we're talking about guys that really deserve a max contract, I know he's got a lot. I know we talk about potential all the time, but we see a lot of talent coming into these sports, especially in the NBA. We're talking about some of the greatest athletes. I don't know if he's going to be a max contract guy just yet. I guess what could push the needle for him is really being able to take this Denver team far. But you look at when Jamal Murray went down, this guy's averaging over 25 points and 6 rebounds a game since Jamal Murray has went down with the injury. And when you looked at Jamal Murray being able to mesh perfectly with Jokic, and then you had just brought Aaron Gordon in, this really felt like the team. A lot of people were saying in the NBA, like, this has to be our favorite almost over Brooklyn, over the Lakers, over Clippers. I mean, we remember how high people really were on this team when they finally brought Aaron Gordon in and got him out of that hellhole that he was playing in the NBA. And when you look at Michael Porter Jr., he was playing great even when Murray was there, Jokic and Gordon. Now with Murray going down, tearing that ACL, he is stepping up. He is showing you, hey, I could potentially run the offense at times for you. I can be that guy that goes on a hot streak if I need to. I can see the floor effectively like a veteran, like a key guy for a title run. He's got it all in the tank, and I'd love to see Michael Porter do it. I think he'll play pretty well this series. Might be potentially the third or fourth best player this series, maybe the second or third. Who knows? He's got the potential to do that, but I think Michael Porter Jr. is not going to disappoint, and he'll play a big role for these Nuggets down the stretch.
Yeah, especially when you got a team on the other side in the Portland Trailblazers with CJ McCollum, Damian Lillard, Norman Powell, guys who could just fill it up on the scoring end. You're going to need some guys to kind of counteract that on the Denver Nuggets side of things, because you're going to get that from Jokic. Who are going to be the other guys? Michael Porter Jr. is the second guy that you always have to look to in that team. And yes, I agree with you. I think he's going to play a big role, and I think he's going to have a great series. But Adam, in terms of the X factor in this series, who do you have as the biggest one?
Man, so it's going to be Michael Porter Jr. again. It sounds like a lot of these things are flowing similarly, but I mean, like we were just saying, he's going to have to step up and be that guy, because with the Nuggets having so much talent, they've got the fan base in it. They've got the viewers into it. They've got the NBA into it. And when we're talking about a guy like Jokic potentially reforming the center position, going on this run, talking about MVP hopes, Michael Porter Jr. is just going to make him look that much better. And it's going to make this team really complete down the stretch. So Michael Porter Jr. is definitely the X factor in this series, man.
Yeah, definitely. I was definitely thinking about Michael Porter Jr. as my X factor as well, but I'm going to be going to another guy that we also mentioned earlier, the guy who was in that hellhole in Orlando earlier this season. I got to talk about Aaron Gordon because the Denver Nuggets are one of the best offensive teams in basketball. What's going to really make a difference for them is having someone play for them greatly on the defensive end, especially on the perimeter. And Aaron Gordon is that number one guy defensively on the perimeter to really look out for. Yesterday against the Trailblazers, they gave up 19 threes. I don't expect them to shoot that well from deep again, but Aaron Gordon is going to have to be at least a solid defender on one of CJ McCollum or Damian Lillard in this series, and he's also going to have to do something on the offensive end. I mean, catch lobs, hit the open three when it's open for him. He's going to have to maybe not do as much of an offensive load as Michael Porter Jr., but he's going to have to contribute there as well. So Adam says to look out for Michael Porter Jr. I say to look out for Aaron Gordon.
Absolutely agree with you, man. And Aaron Gordon is able to stretch the floor well, like you said, catch lobs. And this is a guy who really elevated his scoring aspect of his game. I mean, when he first came into the league, you're really curious about his jump shot. Let's not even really talk about a 3-point shot. But now you look at a guy who has improved his game well enough to where, okay, we can respect the jumper. We know he's going to play strong on the inside, and we know what he does at the rim as well.
Yeah, those are two players to definitely look out for in this series. I'm going to throw it back to Adam for the 4-5 matchup in the West. We have the Dallas Mavericks. We have the Los Angeles Clippers. Adam, what is your biggest question going into this series?
So for me, as much as I don't want to go this route because it is the Clippers that a lot of people have had high hopes for, but are we going to see the same old Clippers? I mean, really, they're losing to these teams at the end. They ended the season, I want to say 4-6 in their last 10, and you still got Kawhi Leonard having questions about being a closer, being a true leader. Yeah, they brought Rajon Rondo over, who, call me crazy, might end up being the best player in this series and down the stretch for these Clippers, because I said it on PettySportz earlier in the year. Do the Clippers need a point guard? Do they need somebody in there that will speak, that will know how to move that offense, that knows how to close a game, that knows how to hit those clutch shots? Because let's be real, Kawhi Leonard and Paul George have not been those guys this year. I mean, you look at the first half yesterday from Pandemic P. Yeah, he ended up playing better out in the second half, but still losing to Dallas at the end of all of it. You don't want to feel like this is the same old Clippers, because this is a team that has been on the verge for some time now, even back to the Chris Paul, Blake Griffin, DeAndre Jordan days. Caron Butler, Jamal Crawford, JJ Redick. I mean, you name it, they had it at one point or another. Broke it up, were bad for a lot of years. You bring Doc Rivers in and you're wondering, is he going to be that coach? Again, you feel like you need some leadership because it obviously wasn't Vinny Del Negro. Doc Rivers has always shrunk in the big moments. Now it's Tyronn Lue. So there's still questions. You don't want them to be the same old Clippers. And we'll see, are Kawhi and Paul George going to be able to be that duo that we know they can be, but it feels like they have yet to hit that potential. We know they didn't have a lot of chemistry last year either. So, like I said, same old Clippers. I mean, you tell me, TV.
Yeah, that's definitely something to look out for, because I like the point you brought up there about trying to close games. And yesterday against the Mavericks, they just could not do that.
Exactly.
They had multiple chances at the end, and where they lost this game was at the free throw line. 5 free throws missed in the final minute of this game. Marcus Morris missing 2, Rajon Rondo missing 2, Kawhi missing a key free throw late with 40 seconds left. These are the type of things that we point towards the Clippers as issues in terms of closing the game. Paul George not being able to step up late in this game. He had a good second half yesterday, but yeah, there's still a lot of question marks around this team. It still doesn't even look like they fully know how to play with each other. And the fact that they still haven't been able to do this 2 years in is kind of worrying. And you have a Dallas Mavericks team who their system is Luka Doncic. Whether KP is in and out the lineup or not, Luka Doncic is a system, and he just knows how to bring the best of these guys. So yeah, it's extremely important to see like how the Clippers are going to be able to play out this year's playoffs, because like you said at the end, they're 4-7 in their final 11 games. They even you can even tell they were trying to avoid the Lakers in the second round, so they were purposely losing instead of trying to build momentum towards the playoffs. They wanted to lose just so they can avoid the Lakers. Is that going to backfire in the end because they're facing Luka Doncic? We have to wait and see. But yeah, that is definitely a great question to ask. Now, in terms of the X factor in the series, I want to start it off with this one. My X factor in this Mavs Clipper series is Tim Hardaway Jr. This guy is the kind of like how on the Utah Jazz Jordan Clarkson is the secondary shot creator for that team. Same thing with Tim Hardaway Jr. here. And Luka Doncic, when he was getting double teamed, quadruple teamed in the fourth quarter there, he was able to hit some shots. He finished yesterday's game with 22 points. And they're going to need something like that, especially with KP not being like 100% this series. Maybe he might be out of the game. Maybe he won't. We still are kind of on a game-to-game basis with that. And Tim Hardaway Jr., again, I mean, he's someone that can either have like a 30-point game and just go completely off, or he could just completely shrink at these moments. But I think him playing well is going to be a direct correlation to how this Mavericks team is going to go. What do you think, Adam? Who do you think is going to be what is your X factor for the series?
Oddly enough, as much as I want to say Rajon Rondo, I feel like it's going to be a given that he's going to do well. I mean, we talk about playoff Rondo all the time, and Kawhi Leonard is without question on any day of the week. I mean, if we're talking about both players at their floor, Kawhi Leonard is a better player than Paul George. So it makes me look at playoff P, pandemic P. Paul George, what are you going to be, man? Are you finally going to, it's kind of like a smudge on Chris Paul's career. We know you've been great. We know you've had a lot of moments in your career where you've been favored as an MVP at one point or another. And we know about the leg injury as well with Paul George. And that's why I try not to be so hard on him. But when you talk about, Kawhi was basically on the phone with this guy, we felt like saying, hey, where you at? I need some help. I'm not trying to go to the Lakers and just absolutely make the NBA unwatchable at one point or another, so you've got Kawhi Leonard in there, you've got Paul George, and you wonder, is Paul George finally going to put some runs together, put some actual decent defensive stances together? Because when I was talking about him last year in the bubble, I said, what can I really call Paul George? A game manager? Not really. An elite scorer? Definitely not. Is he even a lockdown defender? I don't know. I need Paul George to really get an identity in this series, and that's going to be vital if the Clippers want to shut everybody up and say, hey, we've got this talent. We even brought in one of the best playoff point guards of all time in Rajon Rondo. Now it's time for us to perform. So I have to look at Paul George in this series.
Yeah, I definitely have to agree with you there, Paul George. Everyone's eyes and ears are going to be on him in this series because they should win this. That's the thing. The Clippers should be winning the series, but yesterday just shows that they are still not fully in it. They are still not kind of 100% like with each other. And the Dallas Mavericks, I mean, they tied the series up 2-2 last year in the bubble before KP went down with injury. So that is definitely something to look out for. Pandemic P, playoff P, however you want to call it. He is someone that is going to be a massive talking point in the series. And honestly, it's weird to say it for someone of his caliber, but he is an X factor, which we shouldn't really be saying. We should know what we're getting from Paul George, especially with his caliber of a player, but he hasn't shown it. So yeah, I definitely agree with him being an X factor as well. That is the West side of things. Let us know down below what you guys think. If you have any answers to these questions, leave it down below. Let's head over to the East, and we're going to start off with this 1-8 matchup. We have the Philadelphia 76ers taking on the Washington Wizards. And I'm going to be starting off with the question here. My first question about the series is, will Embiid's regular season play be able to translate into the playoffs? Because this season, bringing in Doc Rivers, he basically told Joel Embiid this entire season, look, you're taking way too many threes. You're one of the most dominant players in the NBA. Get your butt into the paint and just dominate. And that's exactly what he did. Career high numbers. He probably would be near the top of the MVP discussions if it wasn't for that injury that sidelined him for over 20 games.
Yeah.
I mean, he is one of the better players in the league, arguably the top center in the league. Absolutely. And before this episode, I actually watched the 76ers game against the Wizards, and man, this guy was dominant. Even though he was in foul trouble early in this game, that is some good signs, especially against these Wizard bigs who, to be honest, although Daniel Gafford has been a nice player for them throughout this run, none of them can handle Embiid. None of them should be able to handle Embiid. Can Embiid maintain his dominance for an entire playoff series? We have yet to see that in his career. But I think this is a good time to show it, especially when he has a massive advantage on these Wizards bigs. So Adam, how do you feel about Embiid going into this playoffs, and like how do you think he's going to perform this series?
I'm very confident about Joel Embiid this year because when you talk about Doc Rivers really giving him a gut check, yeah, Doc Rivers might have shrunk in big moments to where his team couldn't finish, but there's no question that he can develop talent. We've seen it a lot. I mean, at the end of the day, the guy has had a very good coaching career. He's a legend. He has won an NBA Finals. Even if it is only one, he's still got the championship caliber pedigree somewhat running through his knowledge and running through his veins. So just telling that to Joel Embiid and then seeing Embiid, hey, straighten up, seeing Embiid actually go dominate down low in the paint, be able to take the Sixers team to the number 1 seed in the Eastern Conference. And you saw the heartbreaking shot you saw the heartbreaking moment for Joel Embiid when Kawhi Leonard hit that shot. And that showed you that he's got emotion in this game. He's not just going to walk off the court, avoid the cameras. No, he'll cry right there in front of you because he wants to leave it all on the court. And it really feels like he did that this year. But at the same time, like you said, TV, you hope he didn't leave it literally all on the court in the regular season to where it can't come over to the postseason, because obviously we can all sit here confidently and say if Joel Embiid doesn't perform well, they're not going to get out of the first round. And that's just a fact. I mean, that's their best player. Yeah, you've got a Tobias Harris as well. But I mean, this is Joel Embiid. We're talking about a top player in the National Basketball Association.
Yeah. And another thing, just to really just kind of drive to the point in the ground, I mean, he is still an injury prone player. That's still something to look out for. Him and Ben Simmons have had constant injuries throughout their careers. So that's something to look out for 100%. But man, if he can continue to play like he did today, this series should be easy for the Philadelphia 76ers. I'm going to throw it back to Adam for this one. Who is your X factor in this series?
The X factor in this series, man, let's see. If I really had to dig through it, X factor for the Sixers and Wizards. Man, I mean, it's like maybe Westbrook, but Westbrook is, I mean, he's gonna be able to play well throughout the series. Bradley Beal is obviously a baller. I mean, I don't know, man. It kind of, you got so much talent going into this series that at the end of the day, you're like, I mean, who does have to be the big guy that steps up? I might say it's Tobias Harris, just because you don't want to have all that pressure on Joel Embiid. You just said it greatly and summed it up a lot there, that you don't want him to leave all of that play in the regular season. And then, also with Westbrook, I mean, you could go a couple different ways. You also hope that Westbrook isn't going to be too much and plays like he does, it feels like, about maybe 50-60% of the time in the playoffs, where he misses the big shot. He's going 200 miles an hour when it really needs to be about 75 in all reality. So there's a lot of guys you could look at. I'd say either Harris or Westbrook would be the X factor in this series.
Yeah, I'm going to have to agree with you on the Tobias Harris thing. He is my X factor for the series. In today's game, he was absolutely phenomenal. I think he scored 36 or 38 points in this one, which is absolutely key for this team because Joel Embiid was out early in the game due to foul trouble. And seeing this guy being able to hit threes, hit from the mid-range, attack the rim, they need that from someone else other than Joel Embiid in this series. And if Tobias Harris can play at an all-star level, this makes this 76er team scary and even makes them gives them a better chance against teams like the Brooklyn Nets, or even if they go up against the Lakers somehow in the finals. He is going to be an absolutely big player for them. He is their second best player in terms of isolation situations as well. He could shoot on all three levels at his best. So yeah, Tobias Harris is definitely someone to look out for, especially if he can maintain all-star form in this playoffs. I mean, he did it today. Let's see if he could do it going forward. Let's move on to the 2-7 matchup in the East. We have the Brooklyn Nets taking on the Boston Celtics. I'm going to throw it over to Adam here. What is your biggest question in terms of this series?
My biggest question has to be looking at James Harden. Do we finally see him silence the critics for the playoffs? Yeah, we know he's been in a Western Conference Finals, and it was a really tough series with the Golden State Warriors. And yes, he did have a good game last night as well. The Big Three performed well. But at the end of the day, Harden, again, still has this monkey on his back when it comes to the playoffs. You look, it feels like sometimes he's out there for 20, 21 seconds just dribbling around, and then he's going to jack up a shot that potentially either is catching all the net or is making him look like a bum potentially. Like, okay, what are you doing, James Harden? You've been in the NFL, or not the NFL, the NBA for a while now. You're a veteran. Like what's going on with you? And then you also check out the fact that he's still, like I said, he's still got this monkey on his back to where it feels like it's kind of tarnishing his legacy, because we talk about great regular season players all the time. We talk about MVPs. You could be defensive player of the year, whatever the case may be in the NBA and in any sport you're in. What are you when the big moments come down to it? What are you when it's in the postseason and you're going to make that championship run? Are you going to grow or are you going to shrink? So I'm definitely keeping my eye on James Harden. Does he finally silence the critics this year, especially after showing his tail in Houston, showing up extremely out of weight? I mean, just really doing everything he could to get into Brooklyn. Now it's time.
Yeah, 100%. And what's key about this, I mean, in terms of James Harden this year compared to other years, is that he doesn't have the pressure on him to take every single shot like he did in Houston over the past few years. I mean, he had Chris Paul with him, but Chris Paul is not one to be shooting like every other position like James Harden did back in Houston. Now he has Kyrie beside him. Now he has KD, and he has guys on the perimeter that can hit shots especially open threes with people like Joe Harris, TLC. And you have these type of guys like alongside him. I think this is probably the best team, clearly the best team he's been on. This is his time to take advantage of having these great players around him and just dominate, just absolutely dominate, not even on the scoring end, but just picking defenses apart, using their talent um, against whatever team they're facing. And in this case, it is the Boston Celtics. And in this series, I mean, there's just no one that can front him. I mean, yes, Marcus Smart's going to play him probably most of the game, but he can use this as an opportunity to even get involved, to get Kyrie involved, KD involved, every other player on that team, because this team is just so damn good, so damn deep. I think he's going to play absolutely great in this series, and I think it just has to do with him just having not a lot of pressure on him, especially with both these stars beside him. So going on to the X factor of this series, I'm going to start off with the X factor in this series. My X factor is Kemba Walker for the Boston Celtics. It feels like the Nets are going to sweep this, especially since last night's game. That was probably the Celtics' best chance. But if the Celtics want any shot of winning this series, Kemba Walker is going to have to be probably the second or third best player on the court, which is going to be extremely difficult, especially facing off against KD, Harden, and Kyrie. But Kemba is going to have to be that guy for them to even have a chance. He struggled mightily in the second half yesterday, only hitting, I think, his only 6 points in the fourth quarter out of the entire second half. Kemba Walker is someone for me to look at. Adam, who is your X factor for this series?
So I think the overall X factor for this series, and it's kind of going to go, we've got Brooklyn being one of those teams where it's okay. It's championship or bust. Look at the super talent that you have on there. Look at the super team. Look at all the superstars that are on this team that they feel like they're still trying to get that extra notch into their legacy. Harden with being in the playoffs. We always love to strip the two titles away from KD with Golden State, which, yeah, I'm not a fan of them either, but he still got them. And then you also look at Kyrie Irving, who feels like still a flake at the end of the day. Amazing handles, one of the most talented point guards we've ever seen, definitely an Hall of Famer and all-timer. But all three of those guys still want to make an extra notch in their legacy. I think the X factor comes down to overall Brooklyn having an easy series here. Like you said, this cannot be any more than a 5-game series. I almost want to venture to say this can't be any more than a 4-game series. It has to be a sweep, but I'm not going to disrespect Boston like that. Yes, they are outnumbered and they're going to be out talented, basically, if you want to throw that out there, for this series. But overall, and Brooklyn has dealt with injuries with Harden, with KD, with Kyrie, only a few games altogether this year, it feels like, where the big three was absolutely in it. They were all on the court at the same time and everything was flowing. We really saw that super team effect. If we potentially had this series drug out too long, who knows what could happen potentially to Kevin Durant or Kyrie Irving or James Harden, because you are wondering what's the health going to be like and can they have that chemistry, because yes, playing longer could build the chemistry for them, but it also could be just a longer time before they get to that chemistry being built at the right moment in the postseason for them to make that finals run. So I think overall it has to be a pretty easy series for Brooklyn. Can't go any more than 5 games. And if we're being really picky, just go ahead and get them out of there, Brooklyn. Sweep them 4 games, move on to the next one.
Yeah, and I like the point you brought out there with the injuries. I mean, they were at some points. Kyrie, KD, and Harden had their injury woes this season, and
Yep.
if they can keep this series quick, it means extra rest time for whoever you have to face in the second round, whether it's the New York Knicks or the Atlanta Hawks, because that series is going to go long. You're going to want to have a quick series here with the Boston Celtics. Moving on to the 3-6 matchup in this one, we have the number 3 seeded Milwaukee Bucks going up against the Miami Heat. Adam, what is your biggest question for this series?
My biggest question, man, for the Bucks and the Heat, when you look at everything coming down to it, it's, what is going to happen necessarily with Giannis? Are we sure that Giannis is going to be able to take this team to the next level? Because he's been a guy that time and time again, and we kind of feel like we want to compare him to Lamar Jackson, plays great with a lead, and he can be a leader of the team when they're up and when they're at it. But at the end of the day, if you're behind, if you're dealing with a little bit of adversity, can you overcome that and really be an all-time great, have that Hall of Fame mentality and that push to take your team to the next level? And there's no question that, obviously Giannis is a 2-time MVP. He's the reigning MVP back-to-back years. He is the reigning defensive player of the year as well until we get our NBA awards for this season. But overall, you wonder, what is it going to be with Giannis? I mean, is he going to be able to take that big step? We're not sure. So it makes you wonder, how is it going to be?
Yeah, it's definitely something to look at. I mean, yesterday he did not play great. I think he was like 11 for 27, 10 for 27, even though he had a good
Right.
amount of points. But luckily for him, his surrounding teammates, Chris Middleton, hit some big shots, including the game winner yesterday. Drew Holiday played good minutes for them. And I think this is the perfect series for Giannis to kind of exercise those demons that you've been talking about from like previous years, where he is not able to take this team to the next level. Faced a team last year where, to be frank, they got embarrassed by the Heat. They were the number one team in the NBA throughout the entire regular season, and they lost the 5 games to a lower seeded Heat. That was extremely embarrassing. You go into the season, you're locked and loaded. You got a better roster around you. This is the perfect series for you to exercise those demons and just kind of like show that you're able to take this team to the next level. If you could take down the team that took you down last year, I think that that is something to definitely look at. And I think this would be a great series for him to absolutely turn up. In terms of X factors, I'm going to start with mine here. I'm going to the Heat side of things. I'm going to be talking about Goran Dragic. Goran Dragic for me is the X factor in this series because he hasn't been great this entire regular season. He hasn't been the best player that we've seen him play last year in the Miami Heat, where he was absolutely fantastic throughout the playoffs. Goran Dragic is a great player. We've seen it. We've seen him do it before. He is a veteran. He played well yesterday, but can he do this to keep this Heat team in it? Because although they are the defending Eastern Conference champions, they still have a lot of question marks on this year's roster. It's definitely not the same as last year's roster. And if they want any chance to beat the Bucks, Goran Dragic is gonna have to play big. Adam, who is your X factor for the series?
For the Bucks Heat series, correct?
Yes.
For the Bucks Heat series, man, Drew Holiday being that third key piece to Giannis and Middleton, because we talk about pressure on these players. You can be a veteran at the end of the day and still have pressure on your shoulders, but I don't think Giannis is to that point yet. I don't think Giannis is to that elite level to where you know he's going to perform in the big moments. I mean, you see in a game one yesterday to where it takes Chris Middleton literally hitting a crazy shot. And remember when they brought Drew Holiday in, it was a huge thing for them. You know, everybody was saying, oh, the Bucks have to do it now. I mean, is Giannis going to leave after this year? Is he going to go to the Heat? What could potentially be the issue? And then Chris Middleton as well. We know how Chris Middleton has played this year in the NBA, and he's been a good piece next to Giannis. But if you could just have that Drew Holiday pickup really come through for you right now in the playoffs, it would just really make everybody extremely happy for Milwaukee. And we would know that it was a good pickup for them at the end of the day.
Yeah, Drew Holiday, it was a massive deal when they brought him over in that trade. They basically traded all their assets for Drew Holiday in a similar deal to kind of what the Lakers had to trade away to get Anthony Davis. And people thought that was a lot at the time. Now this is the time for him to show up his value. And yes, this series is definitely something to look out at. Drew Holiday has to play big here. We're going to have to move on to the final series in the East. The final series we're going to be discussing in this episode, the 4-5 matchup. We have the New York Knicks taking on the Atlanta Hawks. Man, this series is going to be something to look out for. And yeah, there's gonna be something like where both teams just do not have any playoff experience in this one.
Yeah.
This is something to definitely kind of like look out for, because both these teams are very young, both have good coaches, but they haven't been able to take their teams far. I'm gonna start off with this question over here. My question for this team is, which of these young players are gonna step up? Which of these young stars are gonna step up? Is it Julius Randle? Is it going to be Trae Young? Because I think whoever plays better here is going to decide who's going to be winning this series. Mostly because, I mean, we have no really like playoff resume or something like that for any of these players. This is their first time being there, and you have both these guys leading their teams in the scoring department. Who's going to outplay the other is going to be absolutely key in this matchup. Is Trae Young going to get frustrated when he's not going to be getting the fouls that he's getting in the regular season? Is Julius Randle's offensive explosion just a product of the regular season, or is this going to be sustainable throughout the playoffs? Who knows? I think that's going to be something to definitely look out for. Knicks, Hawks, which star plays better for me is gonna be the deciding factor in the series. Adam, how do you feel about the series, and who's like what's something to like watch out for?
Something to watch out for in this Knicks Hawks series is definitely going to be Nate McMillan finally putting the icing on the cake for these Atlanta Hawks. Because when Lloyd Pierce was in there, this was one of the craziest stories in the NBA when Lloyd Pierce just couldn't handle this young talent, couldn't handle the fact that Trae Young was the leader of this team. And at the end of the day, players for the Hawks felt like they couldn't even talk to Lloyd Pierce about something simple that was going on. That was maybe a little discord on the court or in the locker room without them truly feeling like they were being listened to, that they were heard, and that even some sort of action or at least talking to was going to happen to address the situation. They were terrible in the fourth quarter. Then you bring in Nate McMillan. I mean, at one point this season, the Hawks were like 17-20, 17-24.
Yeah.
I mean, they were below 500. They were a bad team, and they just couldn't play in the fourth quarter. They had no way to close it out. It was kind of like the Mavericks for a couple seasons with the young team. Luka wasn't knowing how to close the games yet, and that's going to take time to develop. Or you go get a guy like Nate McMillan, who has coached well over 1,300 games, I'm pretty sure, in his NBA career. He is a very respected coach, and the Hawks are going to stick with him now. So also, and that makes another point, showing that the Hawks are going to stick with him, we're confident you can take us places. We are confident that you can be this driving force, that you know how to handle this young talent, that you also know how to get these players into shape, snap them out of whatever they might be. And because you're well respected, you know what's going on in the NBA. And overall, you are a extremely knowledgeable coach. So I think Nate McMillan is a guy, I know he's not on the court. It's going to be the coach to see, and really even the battle of the coaches. I mean, let's not forget about who Tom Thibodeau was with Derrick Rose, with a Carlos Boozer, with a Joakim Noah, with a Jimmy Butler at one point or another, to where that was a very grinded out defensive team. You look at the Knicks, who have been number one in defense for a little bit of time now in the NBA, a good bit of time actually this season. And they're going to be able to put the pressure on this Hawks team that doesn't have any experience. But then again, neither do the Knicks. I think the battle of the coaches here, I know I'm carrying it out, but I think the battle of the coaches here are really going to be what decides this series.
Yeah, that's definitely something to look out for. These two coaches are the ones with the playoff resumes compared to the players, and that's something to look out for. Now we're gonna go to the final X factors of this series. I'm gonna throw it over to Adam. Who is your X factor in this next Hawk series?
I think the X factor in this Knicks Hawks series is going to be having those small, key players for the Hawks, like a Tony Snell, like potentially a Bogey, a Bogdan Bogdanovic, like potentially, if we're going to see a good bit of John Collins. I don't think we're going to see any Cam Reddish, but you wonder about John Collins as well. And this Hawks team is very deep to where you just keep on naming off these names and you're like, hey, these are guys that could come out, run the floor, stretch the offense well, and overall be a tough out for any team in the NBA, even if they were below 500 right now. They played up very well with Nate McMillan being able to coach them up to the level that they're at now. I think the overall young talent of the team as well needs to be orchestrated well. And it really just goes back to Nate McMillan. He's got a lot of pressure on him, but realistically, this is one of the few coaches in the NBA that, like we said, he's well respected. This is one of the few guys in the league that could take this young team that feels like they're kind of erratic at times, hone them in. And I've been saying it, call me crazy if you want, the ceiling for this Hawks team is an Eastern Conference Finals appearance. If they start really rolling, get a Tony Snell, like I said, get a Bogey, get a John Collins out there. Trae Young obviously performs. We haven't even mentioned Clint Capella, who's a top player, a top defensive player. And when he goes, it feels like they can live and die by Clint Capella. So it really just goes back to the coaching for this series, man.
Yeah, 100%, 100% on that. My X factor for the series, you talked about the young core of the Atlanta Hawks. I'm going to be pointing out one guy here, and that is DeAndre Hunter. DeAndre Hunter, before his injury early in the season, was having a career year, having a much better year than he did in his rookie season, averaging 15 points a game, 5 rebounds, almost 2 assists. And he's going to be absolutely key, especially in defending someone like a Julius Randle, someone who is long, someone who has like the defensive capabilities to handle someone like a Julius Randle. I know he's coming off of injury, but he is someone that not only can gives him the best chance at slowing down Randall, but his improved offensive game can help take this team to the next level, give them that extra score that they've been seeking. And like I said, although he's coming back from injury, he could play a massive role in this because we know. Trae Young, there's still a question mark, but we know that he's probably going to be one of their best players. Same thing with Clint Capella, but DeAndre Hunter, can he be that guy to step up, and can he do play well this young into his career? But yeah, those are all the series, all the X factors. Let us know down below what you guys think. Who is your X factors for any of these series? I'm willing to display to you guys in the comment section. Just leave it down below. But I think this is where we're going to end this episode. Thank you guys for watching. Before we head out, I'm going to throw it over to Adam. What do you have upcoming, and what can they, and if there's anything else you want to promote?
Yeah, man, absolutely. So, like I said, we're always doing the live show on Wednesdays with PettySportz, 8 p.m. Eastern time. You can check out King's Broadcasting Studios as well. It'll be on there, either Facebook or YouTube, but without a doubt, it'll be on both the PettySportz YouTube and Facebook page. And speaking of King's Broadcasting Studios, if there's anybody in the Metro Atlanta area, or just in Georgia in general, and you're looking for a good studio to invest your passion in, if you're trying to do a podcast, if you're trying to just generally maybe get some time on camera, practice your on-air personality, you can definitely go to them. Mike and Gary over there, you have a whole team behind you. They help you out with colors. They help you out with graphics, full studio, microphones, desks, broadcasting arms. You've got the green screen behind you as well for some great graphics to really get you into the studio feel. We're always talking about boxing over there as well. We know, we feel like the boxing content might be slacking a little bit in the sports world. Definitely NBA, NFL, and maybe even some golf or some UFC. You never know. Whatever's hot for PettySportz, man, we're always talking it over there. And TV, again, man, I appreciate you having me on today.
Yeah, it was awesome having you on. You were a great guest. We definitely have to have you on at some point in the future. I'm going to have all the links to the PettySportz podcast /show in the description of this video, also in my link tree, and also the links to Adam's socials where you could go check him out. And he'll probably send you to all the links that you need to go to if you want to check out his channel. But yeah, that's the end of today's episode. Thank you guys for watching. Remember to show love on all the podcast channels. Like, share, and subscribe if you're on YouTube. And remember to follow @TV on Basketball on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram for some awesome content. I'm going to be back on Friday with another episode, potentially another guest. You're going to have to wait and see. But yeah, thank you guys for all your support. We're almost at 3,000 downloads, so thank you guys for all of that. But yeah, thank you guys for watching another episode. Thank you for Adam from coming on.
Yeah, man.
And hope you all have a fantastic day. Take it easy, guys. TV signing out. Adam signing out. Peace.